Australia's manufacturing revival. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian.Heise here, and welcome to another episode of HeiseSays. I've got my morning stein of coffee, and I thought we'd have a look at this article that's been shared to me by several viewers, discussing, well, hopes of a revival of manufacturing here in Australia. Now, if you are not aware, manufacturing has taken a bit of a hit as a share of GDP over, well, since the 60s, really. It's been plunging. It's been plunging, you know. What is it? Hovering over 5% at the moment. Probably 6% will be generous. So it's not a significant portion of our economy as it was in the past. It's definitely gone down. And one issue with regard to manufacturing, and one issue with regard to our economy as well, is that, well, we're not a very complex economy. You'll hear me say this over and over again. We export the very simple things, raw products. We import more advanced products. You know, say all our international trade, and I'll bring up this chart here just to show you, and just to demonstrate. I want this chart, this website tracking shipping. Say all of a sudden all the shipping stopped. Australia's ability to produce and manufacture advanced materials and products would be significantly hit. And one thing I'm noticing in all these pieces where they're discussing about manufacturing returning, Australian manufacturing coming back, it's never massive. It feels more like they're showing a small warehouse with people working on the tools themselves. You know, a ramped up cottage industry, really. When all the equipment that they're using, all that would be imported anyway. You know, do you think you get a silicon chip made anywhere other than a university here in Australia? What would the cost be for manufacturing here? We don't have the same scales as other countries. So you'll have people who would argue for, well, we need to protect these industries. So we need to put tariffs up. Yes, tariffs, so the foreigners will pay, and they don't understand. They don't understand that the person who pays for a tariff is us, the citizens. It's another tax. It's another tax on goods to protect local industries that just can't compete. So if you want to pay that, you need to thank Jerry Harvey for pushing for a GST on imported products, because he's protecting retail jobs. That's what he's doing. That's the exact same thing as a tariff. And the problem is, people want to save money. People want to be cheap. That's just how it is. We're all like that. When you go to Bunnings, you see several, different products. I try and find Australian made, but I'm a cheap bastard, guys. I would rather reduce my debt slavery for my mortgage quicker, and I don't think I'm alone. So let's have a look. Australian manufacturing has been in terminal decline, but the pandemic might revive it. And you can see here. I mean, this is impressive. It looks like he's filming or recording something here, but this isn't a massive production line manufacturing, is it? This is working with one piece of equipment at one point. I'd say in some ways this is more boutique manufacturing. I've got friends in construction that work like this. They've got their factory. He just sent me an email. He's bought a new machine, a portable CNC router, so he can cut into concrete and put epoxy in it and do fantastic designs in there. Very, very cool. He's got all the greatest toys. But that's different to the scale that you can get in these other countries. You can see behind me the shelves that's built with local plywood. We got it. Our office was in Yeronga. There was a wood supplier just up the road. We got it in there. We got it dropped off. It was B grade. Didn't have any of the dangerous chemicals that you can get in it from offshore. And the quality was nice. So we sanded it all down and we stained it all black. So it was desks. It was workstations. It was bookshelves at the office. We used it to divide the office in half to create a meeting room. Now, when I've moved back home, you can see behind me, it's my desks, it's bookshelves, it's the workstation I have here, so I'm repurposing it. But it was more expensive. It was much more expensive. Even the door handles that we put on our shop front door were over $1,000 because they were locally manufactured. Do you think the people coming into the office noticed? We could brag about it. Do you think they cared? So, there's the issue, guys. There's the issue. It needs to be economically competitive, or else they're not going to survive, or else they're going to start calling for government handouts in the form of subsidies or tariffs to protect the industries. So then you're bailing out businesses that aren't competitive. We saw what happened to our car industry once they removed all the tariffs. It disappeared. It disappeared because you could get a car from overseas for a fraction of the price. You get a cheap Korean car that runs fine for a fraction of the price, a share of the price. That's the issue, guys. Just because it's made in Australia, sadly, doesn't mean it's going to be better, everyone. I think we got tickets on ourselves a little much. Bit of arrogance there, I'd say. We need to be humbled a bit and compete. That's why I'd argue for special economic zones and regions around the country, which I'd restrict to only citizens, to give us a competitive advantage and to remove the burden of the state office. We need to experiment with some innovation. But let's have a look here. Let's have a look here. I mean, this is going to be good for some small manufacturers, don't get me wrong. Just because they'll be able, some suppliers will learn to have multiple supply sources, even local ones that can bridge the gap of just-in-time supply. But is it going to grow to the scale where it's more than just, a boutique high-end product? If you need to get something machined, something manufactured, where cost isn't as important, but you need a high-end product. There's one gentleman I'd met in construction, because we do a lot of modular construction, volumetric modular construction. And I'll bring up the Heise website, guys, to show you. So you can see commercial, retail. These type of things here. The big mining buildings. I'll zoom in. So this is what I mean, where volumetric modular. That'd be one big portion of a building built down here, put on a truck, sent up to the mines, because they want to keep them. They want to keep the construction work off the mines. It's a cement tile finish. It looks kind of like concrete. Looks quite nice. It's heavy as anything. But this was made locally, and the advantage they had was more expensive than the imported stuff. But you get a certain level of quality, and you get delivery, and you could get it on the site. And this is the Dornier and Caval Ridge. We did these ones a few years ago. Do I have any others there? No, I can't limit it just to one. So we did a lot of modular stuff. Now, there's one gentleman that was actually able to get it cheap, because the Chinese stuff was cheaper. Every man and his dog was going to import Chinese modular products, and make a million. Now, there was a gentleman I met who was actually able to compete at a local level with the Chinese costs. When you factored in the supply issues, when you factored in getting the risks associated with it, and just getting compliance, because they'd have to fly building inspectors over to China to inspect the plumbing before it came here. Crazy things like that, to make sure it complied with Australian standards. He had it all set up. He just jumped in to invest in robotic manufacturing and getting these volumetric buildings all welded together by robots and an assembly line. Unfortunately, it didn't last. He went under soon after. I think he stretched himself too thin. It was a shame. He was focused. From the discussions I had with him, he seemed to be focused too much on the fine detail and not on the bigger picture of the projects. And that was good. So it can be done. It can be done in Australia, but you've got to invest in a lot of equipment. You've got to reduce your need for labor, because of, some of the costs that we have here in our country. Our wages are among the highest in the world, and that just goes through to all other costs, everyone. That's why things are so expensive. And we need to, you can just say, cut wages, get rid of the minimum wage, it's government intervention. But you also need to get rid of the other burdens that you're placing on people that are working. How much do we pay for petrol, for power? How many taxes are hidden everywhere? This tariff here, tariff there, tariff there. That's where I'd argue for SERs. Where, okay, you work there, or the minimum wage is set in half, so you've got to compete a bit harder, or it gives you the opportunity to negotiate more, but this tax is removed from in there. We've got to try something, because what we've been doing for the last, 30, 40 years, it ain't working, guys. Manufacturing is down the toilet. Property prices are skyrocketing. All our investment is going in property. It's about 6%. Tourism is bigger than it all. No, it's not. It's about half it. So, what do you think, guys? So let's have a look at this. The widespread shutdown of global supply chains caused by the pandemic has been good news for Adelaide metal printing company AML 3D. We've seen quite a reasonable increase, probably twofold, from what we would normally get, founder and managing director Andy Sales said. And we have a viewer mentioned in the comment during one of the premieres. He has a little engine manufacturing company, and for like golf carts and things, and he said business was booming. So there are some businesses that are doing well, but look at the scale of them, guys. His company makes metal parts such as propellers and compressors for ships and the automotive industry at his factory in Adelaide and exports them around the world. The parts are created using a new layering technology developed by Mr. Sales that combines traditional welding techniques with digital drawing, a robot, and 3D printing to create metal objects out of titanium, aluminium, nickel, and steel. So this isn't this is quite unique. Like I said, high end. Really high end. It's not going to have the same mass market as other ones. Problem is, if competitors knock him off overseas, steal his approach. That's the big danger. Parts and components normally produced in northern Italy and other parts of Europe at the casting shops and forging shops. With the recent unfortunate pandemic and environment shutting down, some of these customers in Australia are looking for local solutions, Mr. Sales said. So this is good. Even if the foreign European companies come back, he'll be there as another in-time supplier or as an emergency one. Hopefully he's being smart and charging a premium, making them sting a little bit. There is growing interest from the oil and gas sector for his locally made products, as Mr. Sales also eyes off orders as part of the Royal Australian Navy's fleet expansion. Our technology offers the possibility of reduced lead times and reduced manufacturing times, and the process we've got actually offers enhanced strength, which is more beneficial than the traditional casting and forging techniques, he said. Oh, that's great. That's great. Could you even cast and forge it in Australia? There's the other question. Australia's share of manufacturing. AML's 3D growth is the kind of resurgence economists and those in the sector want to see more to pull manufacturing out of its decline. In the 80s, manufacturing was the biggest employer in Australia with 16.5% of the workforce. Now less than 1 million people work in the sector, accounting for 6.4% of jobs. So the jobs share is less than... Is it less than tourism? No. Tourism is 5.2% of jobs. 5.2%. So, there you go, guys. How many people do you think would be willing to get their hands dirty? Is she a welder? Is she a welder? No, it doesn't say who she is. How many people would be willing to get their hands dirty, guys? I think a lot of people will. After they get out of their comfort zone, I think they could see it's quite rewarding actually making something real as opposed to just tweeting about something. I enjoy it. I'm not very good at it. I'm an architect and a desk jockey, but I still love making something. I think that's a cultural difference that Australia needs to re-embrace. Manufacturing your own thing, building your own furniture. Manufacturing's contribution to... we looked at that. New analysis shared with the business by the Australian Institute's Centre for Future Work reveals Australia does not fare well against its OECD counterparts. Most other industrial countries have manufacturing sectors that are successful and large enough to, in aggregate, meet their own domestic needs for manufactured products. Report author and director of the centre, Jim Stamford, explains. In Australia's case, however, we're using more manufactured goods all the time, but we're producing a smaller and smaller share of those. Well, yeah, here's the thing. We're at the end of the world too, guys. We're at the end of the world. I showed you the shipping map, guys. We're a colony at the end of the world. Although international shipping and standardized container formats has kind of dented the impact of that. But we're so close to China. Dr. Stanford has ranked OECD countries based on their manufacturing self-sufficiency, the amount of goods they manufacture versus the amount of goods they use. Australia is last because about 2/3 as much manufactured output as it consumes, so we're consuming more. Most other OECD countries produce on aggregate more manufactured goods than they consume, and Ireland is number 1, which frankly really surprises me. Really surprises me. I thought Germany would be number 1, but there you go. Good on the Irish. Good on you. Germany number 2, Luxembourg, Netherlands, Korea, Switzerland, Hungary, Sweden, Finland, the Czech Republic, and Australia. Now back in, when we're looking at this chart, back in that little gap there between 40s, or even building up to the 40s, Australia was quite innovative in manufacturing. Australia built one of the first cast hull tanks in the world. There are a lot of firsts that came out of Australia, out of our ingenuity. Compare Australia's first tank to New Zealand's first tank. Just look that up. The only ever tank manufactured in New Zealand, and compare that to Australians. And that's why when I tell people New Zealand should just become a state, just purely based on that, on our World War II tank construction technology. Those of you that know what I'm talking about, you completely understand. Look it up if you haven't seen it, guys. Okay, it's a bit of a meme tank from NZ, but good on them for showing ingenuity and building something out of nothing. You know what? I've got to look it up. I'm going to look it up right now. NZ tank, just to show you. The Bob Simpleton tank. We'll look it up here. There you go. There you go, guys. Machine guns on a tractor body. with corrugated metal reinforcing. Very slow, couldn't turn or couldn't shoot, compared to Australia's first tank. There we go. There's the difference. The Sentinel. Is it a Sentinel? Yeah, I think so. It's got the little, yep, there it is, the Sentinel. Has the little funny front. So, what would you rather, guys? Would you rather be sitting in that or in that? But again, I'm going off topic. At least I want to make a point, and I tend to go off topic a bit, is that Australia did work quite good at manufacturing, work quite innovative. But that was a different time, though, as well. That was, when you were challenged. When developing resilience was seen as a good thing, when our culture wasn't as, brought people up a little bit sterner stuff, perhaps. I think there is a mistaken assumption that if you're a rich, high-wage industrial country, you just can't do manufacturing. After all, it's much cheaper to do things in China or Thailand or some other low-wage country. We've found that traditional assumption is absolutely false. So, JobMaker. Dr. Stanford estimates that increasing Australia's manufacturing self-sufficiency to 100% could add another $180 billion a year in new manufacturing output, boost GDP by $50 billion a year, and add more than 650,000 direct and indirect jobs. I think it's a pragmatic and ambitious goal to try and rebuild manufacturing in Australia back to a level that's comparable to our own need for manufacturing. The impact of the pandemic has had on businesses and workers across the nation is well documented. The latest official unemployment rate rose to 7.4% for June, but Treasurer Josh Frydenberg conceded this week the real unemployment rate was probably 11.4%. Advocates for manufacturing say the sector could again be a major employer if it is encouraged to grow. Most of the 926,000 workers in the sector are employed by small to medium enterprises with fewer than 20 employees. That's the issue, guys. That's what I'm talking about, where it feels like it's quite boutique, quite high-end. You'd have to be to compete now. I've went and visited some local manufacturers, a light manufacturer here, where he could even, he could build the LEDs himself. The chips still all came from overseas, but he had the machines to put it all together here. And there's only a few people working there. We've gone from being a very significant employer to less than 1 million people now, said Vonda Fenwick, the chief executive of the South East Melbourne Manufacturers Alliance. Her group is one of many calling on the government to incentivise more manufacturing in Australia. If you look at our any economically successful country in the world, you're looking at a country that's got a healthy, robust, industrialized sector. You've got a country that's manufacturing. The SEMMA is calling on all tiers of government to buy more locally made goods. It simply makes sense for us to be really sticking to those policies, making sure that we're buying locally, making sure that we are mandating local content requirements to ensure that we're producing work for manufacturing. So local suppliers trains. After the roofs of the Australian National University and the National Library of Australia were damaged by January's Canberra hailstorm, they were covered in an Australian invention made in Sydney. Storm Seal is a polyurethane film that is laid on storm-damaged roofs. Heat is applied to it and it shrink wraps on the roof. The country's managing director, Matthew Lexon, makes the product on food-grade manufacturing facilities in Sydney and most capital cities in Australia. He also has plans to make his products in France and the US. We call it a storm-ready response product. So what that means is that when a big storm hits, we actually have the ability to make it on demand, which allows us to not only have to hold stock or to have expenditure when we don't need it. Well, what about the raw products you put into it? Where are you getting that from? Mr. Lexon has been approached to produce the film in Asia, where it will be cheaper, but he said making it closer to his customers meant he could deliver the film more quickly and support the local economy. I mean, it sounds good, but the problem is, what if someone steals your IP and makes it over there and brings it in? You know, what's going to happen then? But it's not just the manufacturing, it's the supply chain that has benefited too. So our polymer, our fire retardant, our UV inhibitors that go into the film, that has a follow-on benefit. Outside of that, we've got several consultants that we use for marketing and sales and communications that are all based in Australia too. Yeah, but how many of them are outsourcing as well? About 30,000 square meters of its product remains on the roofs of national buildings in Canberra. So it's more than just minerals. Australia's extensive mineral resources, including iron ore, bauxite and nickel, plus other primary products such as agriculture, account for about 3/4 of our good exports. The wealth created by exporting raw minerals and resources produced was almost $200 billion last year. You can see here. However, Dr. Stanford said Australia was selling itself short by exporting minerals such as lithium, a mineral that is the largest, we're the largest producer of the world in its raw form. Well, I mean, here's the thing, guys. There was a recent processing plant open in Western Australia to help create jobs and process the lithium. It was owned by a Chinese-controlled government, Chinese-controlled business, a foreign government owning it. Once again, we're limiting our horizons to just digging it out of the ground and then sending it to other countries to then manufacture it into those value-added products that we then import back, he said. Lithium is worth about $750 a ton in its raw form, but we actually manufacture it into batteries. That same amount of lithium will be worth $150,000. I mean, it sounds good, but it's to do with the complexity of it. All of these examples that we've looked here, you're talking about 20 people in small businesses making boutique things. Making batteries is a huge process. They get economies of scale that we're not going to get here. If our batteries cost twice as much, say someone here starts up a battery manufacturing company and they cost twice as much as something imported, what do you think people's going to buy? Then there's going to be calls to put tariffs on batteries to protect the local battery industry. Who's going to suffer? The consumers will suffer. This is the thing. We can't just say we want a manufacturing industry. We need to reduce the burden on these businesses so they compete, or else we're going to pay. Okay? So you might as well just cut checks and give money to these people directly. And don't even get them to work, because it's just a waste of time. Just hand them the money directly so they can spend it in the economy, rather than going through all the rigmarole of making things here much more expensive. It'd be cheaper. About 2/3 of all world trade consists of manufactured products, so if you don't have a strong domestic manufacturing base, you're shooting yourself out of most of the world's commerce, he said. So yeah, I mean, we need to improve the complexity of our manufacturing sector, and the question is, how can Australia do it? Is it going to be through boutique businesses growing up and getting bigger? Is it going to be through government subsidies? Is it going to be through tariffs? Or is it going to be just through people stepping up and paying more for their goods and services? Do you think we're ever going to have the economies of scale to compete with the imported products? Would you pay more for imported? Do you do it when you go to the shops? Or would you look at saving money? And with a recession coming, with unemployment going up, with people scared and worried, what do you think will happen? Let me know, guys. I think the only chance is special economic regions, which change some of the rules up to make it easier for businesses to compete on a global scale. I think that's the only chance that we have. Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe on the channel. If you're a fan and want to support us, there are a few ways you can. You can join us on YouTube or Patreon. You can support us using our affiliate links at Amazon, eBay, Independent Reserve, or Kucoin. You can buy merch from HeiseSays. You can use Gold Pass from the Perth Mint, or support us via PayPal. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you next time.